There we go.
And the third step prayer is on page 63 of your big book. You want to follow along. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always.
Excellent. Thank you, Rob. All right. As Rob was saying a little bit earlier here, just a couple minutes ago, we are on page 25. What I thought we would do is just start with there is a solution, since that one is a pretty good paragraph to get out there.
Okay. So near the top of page 25, everybody. Hello, Anne from Glasgow. We're on page 25. Good to have you here. There is a solution. Almost none of us like the self-searching, the leveling of our pride, the confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. But we saw that it really worked in others, and we had come to believe in the hopelessness and futility of life as we had been living it. When therefore we were approached by those in whom the problem had been solved, there was nothing left for us but to pick up the simple kit of spiritual tools laid at our feet. We have found much of heaven, and we have been rocketed into a fourth dimension of existence of which we had not even dreamed.
Oh, what a paragraph. It basically it's there is a solution, and we're going to learn about that solution as we kind of read along here. The admission that you've got to do some inner thinking, and you've got to swallow your pride, and also really get your the things that aren't necessarily great about you out there in the open. And doing so is very humbling, to say the least. But it does work, and we've got proof based on the people that helped us or helped write this book, and they are the ones that have started this out and have proven that the program works. And then you look around, especially in rooms like this, with others that the program does in fact work. And there's really nothing to do but to focus completely on this program, and um, and just do it. There's it's I think there's a one way you could look at it, that this is easy. You just need to do the steps, but there's a lot of work that goes into that. So I wouldn't necessarily say it's difficult. It's just that it could requires a genuine and sincere commitment to do that. And in doing so, actually will find that you are in a better place all around. And in this case, paragraph talks about being rocketed into the fourth dimension of existence. And uh, I know that a lot of people that are at their worst with alcoholism and drinking are amazed that they have the newfound strength with their uh, partner, their higher power, and are able to actually stop drinking and then apply this new program to the rest of their lives. Rob?
You know, the line just before we started, there is the solution, was so many want to stop but cannot. Now, why can we not stop? Our mind tells us that it's going to be okay to have a drink. Okay, our mind will tell us anything to take. Bill, our buddy Bill from New Jersey, always says, our brain wants its candy and will tell us anything for us to take that first drink. Remember, the obsession of the mind, okay, is all about taking that first drink. That's its number one job. That's all it has to do. Okay, get you to take that first drink, and then goes, I've done my job. Now the allergy is going to take over, the phenomenal craving, and I will not be able to control the amount that I take. So, but the next line right after, so many want to stop but cannot. Bill tells us there is a solution. Highlight that. There is a solution. Okay. We might not like, doing what we have to do, but we don't like where we are at in our lives. Okay. We have hit bottom in a lot of cases. Okay. Remember when this book was written, they dealt with really bad drunks. Okay. These weren't, people that have had a couple of consequences that didn't go their way. They were dealing with low bottom drunks. People that were in treatment centers, people that had been locked up. Okay. Put in mental asylums. Okay. So they dealt with really difficult people. But you know what? They did soul self-searching, step 4, the leveling of their pride, step 6 to 9, the confession of shortcomings, step 5. Okay, which it requires for successful consummation, completion, finish. And remember, if we don't do all the work, we're not going to get what they got. We have to do what they did. Okay, there is a solution, is the title of this chapter. Okay, it doesn't mean that there might be other things out there that can help people stop drinking. But these people only knew of one solution, a solution from their experience. The great fact is just this, and nothing less, that we have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our whole attitude toward life, toward our fellows, and towards God's universe. The central fact of our lives today is the absolute certainty that our Creator has entered into our hearts and lives in a way which is indeed miraculous. He has commenced to accomplish those things for us which we could never do by ourselves.
Absolutely. Finding that higher power is key to the success of this program. That being able to tap in that endless energy and power is also incredibly important. In fact, it's a requirement for this to be successful. And the spiritual experience. I think it's at that point that we could go to page 567 if you want, Rob.
That's good to me.
Read the spiritual experience.
So we're moving on to page 567, everybody. The spiritual experience. The terms spiritual experience and spiritual awakening are used many times in this book, which upon careful reading shows that the personality change sufficient to bring about recovery from alcoholism has manifested itself among us in many different forms.
Yeah, and so we're really talking about a major change in us, in you, inward, the innermost parts of you, etc. The looking for a major adjustment in the way that you look at things. The reliance upon yourself, it goes away, and the reliance on this higher power, and it appears. So that's kind of where we are. Rob?
Yeah, I just want to mention why the spiritual experience was put into the big book. The spiritual experience was not added until the second printing of the first edition in March of 1941. The reason it was put in is because a lot of the stories and a couple of the Fitzmayo's experience and Bill Wilson's experience were white light experiences. Suddenly, God came into their life. For most people, that doesn't happen. God comes slowly into their life, or a change comes into their life. And so people who weren't getting this white light experience were saying, well, it's not working for me. And so they put the spiritual experience in so that people would realize that, it it doesn't necessarily have to be a white light experience. It can be slowly, over time, this can happen to you. And a lot of times we don't even realize it. And by the time we get to the end of it, I'm sure I'll tell you my experience of how and when I found that a higher power, God, had come into my life. Okay. Yet it is true that a first printing gave many readers the impression that these personality changes or religious experiences must be in the nature of sudden and spectacular upheavals. Happily for everyone, this conclusion is erroneous.
We'll go ahead and keep going, Rob.
Yeah, because I already talked about that.
Yep.
In the first few chapters, a number of sudden revolutionary changes are described. It was not our intention to create such an impression. Many alcoholics have nevertheless concluded that in order to recover, they must acquire an immediate and overwhelming God consciousness, followed at once by vast change in feeling and outlook.
Certainly that you want to ultimately get to that point, but what we're about to explain here is that you don't need that white light experience, that sudden onset of a change. In fact, most of us don't have that, and we're about to talk about what and why that is. Rob?
Yep, very well put. Among the rapidly growing membership of thousands of alcoholics, such transformations, though frequent, are by no means the rule. Most of our experiences are what the psychologist William James calls the educational variety, because they develop slowly over a period of time. Quite often, friends of the newcomer are aware of the difference long before he is himself. He finally realizes that he has undergone a profound alteration in his reaction to life, that such a change could hardly have been brought about by himself alone. What often takes place in a few months could seldom have been accomplished by years of self discipline. With few exceptions, our members find that they have tapped an unsuspected inner resource which they presently identify with their own conception of a power greater than themselves.
Yeah, so there we are. It is a process. It is a step-by-step kind of approach, and that transformation that happens is over time. And in fact, what they're saying here is that most people will recognize it in the alcoholic before the alcoholic recognizes it themselves. I think that there's some letting go of old ideas and processes and embracing the new and not really trusting it. But once you start to understand that this power has been there and is assisting you in your sobriety and recovery, it also is doing so in the rest of your life as well. It is something that you need to be open to, and it is something that you need to be aware of. But it does happen. Again, what we're talking about is over time and finding that power greater than yourself and your own conception of that power. Rob?
Most of us think this awareness of a power greater than ourselves is the essence of spiritual experience. Our more religious members call it God consciousness.
Yeah, and this is really just talking about what people refer to it as. We talk about it being God. We talk about it being a power greater than ourselves. We talk about it being a higher power. Some people call it God consciousness, etc. And that is what we're basically talking about with regard to what happens with a spiritual experience. Rob?
Yeah, and a spiritual experience is all about change. It's changing ourselves, changing how we think, how we feel. You know, they talk about in the book selfishness, self-centeredness, that we think is the root of our trouble. Alcoholics' trouble is that we only think about ourselves. So the spiritual experience is to change us. So that instead of being so selfish and self-centered, we start thinking about other people. We're almost at page 27. On page 27, it talks about ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding force of our lives, are suddenly cast aside, and a new set of emotions, ideas are put in our life. And that's what this is all about. Spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, personality change, religious experience, spectacular upheaval. These are all talking about change. You know, ideas, emotions that were once their guiding force are now cast aside, and a whole new set of ideas are put in place. Where I care about Anne and worry about her, you know, my thought is not about, oh, well, Rob needs a drink of water, or Rob would like a coffee. No, my thought is, Anne, are you okay? Is everything going okay in your life? Can I help in any way? Can I be of service? And these are thoughts that never used to enter my head. It used to be, well, maybe I can ask Anne for $20 or I shouldn't say $20, 20 pounds. Can I get a couple of quid from Anne? You know, uh, this is being selfish, self-centered instead of, no, now it's a question of what can I do for Anne? You know? So that's what the whole spiritual experience is all about, change. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial.
Yeah, so a couple of things here. Any alcoholic capable of honesty, and they're really talking about this very sincere, very personal honesty that you have with yourself, not what you're talking about to other people, although that is included. It is really that deep searching kind of feeling that you get in that willingness to be completely 100% honest with yourself. And then you have to have an open mind to these spiritual concepts and be able to accept that as such and be able to um, accept it. So the only way that you can be defeated is really this intolerance and or belligerent denial, and that is that forceful, this isn't for me, I'm not doing this, I can do this on my own, etc., is going to set you up for failure in most cases. If it doesn't, then you're really not an alcoholic. And the idea here is that you've got to be honest and you have to be open-minded. Rob?
Yep. I put a couple of things in the chat. When you get a chance, try to take a look at them. What they do is just they pertain to what we've been talking about, and hopefully they either will open things up a little bit more, or give you a little bit more information. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. There is a principle which is a bar against all information, which is proof against all arguments, and which cannot fail to keep a man in everlasting ignorance. That principle is contempt prior to investigation, and it is attributed to Herbert Spencer, but we now know that it was really William Paley, Paley, and I'll put that information in the chat too.
Yeah, and so we're talking here at the end of this excerpt or this appendix that talks about a spiritual experience, and it's really not necessarily, you don't have to be, it doesn't have to be difficult. You really just have to be willing, honest, and open-minded to really get the essentials of this recovery. And I say that, but you really have to be honest about it. That I can't emphasize that enough. It was something that plagued me for a long time. I wasn't honest with myself, and therefore it kept me closed-minded to the concept and the reality of the fact that I needed this spiritual experience in order to fully embrace this program and recover. And once I opened up and once I became very honest about my alcoholism, about my problem, about my plight, about the fact that I was powerless over it and that I needed something more than myself in order to be able to recover, that's when things started to change for me. And that over time, it finally happened. And I woke up, well, it was in the evening one time when I finally had this epiphany and this feeling that came over me, and it was a relief. I can still we can still remember exactly where I was standing and what I was doing. And I had this relief and this kind of overwhelming feeling, and that was it. I was able to stop drinking, and I've stayed stopped ever since. Rob?
Yeah, I just put something in the chat, and I just want to read it if I can be so blunt. This is a story. It's from uh, written by Carl Jung, and it was to Bill. First of all, you frankly told him. Now, this is Dr. Jung talking about Roland Hazard, and Roland Hazard, we know, went to see Dr. Jung, and you know, so pretty much, you know, Young gave the information to Roland. Roland gave it to Ebby. Ebby gave it to Bill. Bill gave it to Dr. Bob. You know, thank God somebody gave it to me. So, first of all, you frankly told him of his hopelessness so far as any medical or psychiatric treatment might be concerned. Second, in response to Roland's frantic query whether there might be any other hope, Young had spoken of a spiritual or religious experience. In short, a genuine conversion. Cautioning, however, that while such experiences sometimes brought recovery to alcoholics, they were comparatively rare. You know? So I just want to throw that out there. And but you know what? Roland went back, got involved with the Oxford group, and was able to have a spiritual awakening. You know, and I just want to talk about my own spiritual awakening for a second. You know, I was in the fellowship for 3 months, and what happened is that I got laid off of work. You know, and I was talking to Leo about work. You know, how much I hated my job. Anyways, uh, you know, but I didn't feel I was capable of doing anything else or worthy of anything else. So I stayed in the job that I hated. But after 3 months of being in the fellowship of AA, you know, I got laid off, called into the office saying, Rob, thank you very much, but we don't need you anymore. Which normally would have devastated me because I would think, "Dude, nobody will hire me, nobody wants me, et cetera, et cetera." You know, poor, pitiful me, you know, self-pity. Okay. But what I found is that when I walked out the door of the office, and I went, God, I know you got my back on this one. I know you got better things in mind for me. I'm going to leave it in your hands. And that is when I realized that a change had come over me. I didn't realize anything had changed in me, but that is when I knew. And you know what? I got a job a few days later. It was the best job I ever had. It only lasted a year and a half. And the reason it only lasted a year and a half is because they closed the office in Canada and moved it to the US. But it taught me so many things. It taught me that I am capable. I can learn new things. You know, I am a good employee, you know. So these things happen in life. But that's when I realized I came to believe, you know. Hopefully that helps you. But it's slow. It wasn't a white light experience. It was a question of, you know, it had slowly developed in me. Thanks for letting me share that.
Oh, yeah.
Always makes me feel good. I
Yep.
don't know about other people, but it makes me feel good. Okay. So we are at did we read the great fact?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so we are if you are seriously alcoholic, we're on page 25. If you were as seriously alcoholic as we were, we believe there is no middle of the road solution. We were in a position where life had become impossible. And if we had passed into the region from which there is no return through human aid, we had but two alternatives. One was to go on to the bitter end, blotting out the consciousness of our intolerable situation as best we could, and the other, to accept spiritual help. This we did because we honestly wanted to and were willing to make the effort.
Absolutely. And we talk about here is if we were seriously alcoholic, basically, if you exhibited both symptoms of the allergy and the malady, and it talks about the fact that they were, meaning that they had that, but they now were able to find this that or have this spiritual experience or awakening and find that higher power and be able to resist even the temptation of a drink. There's no middle of the road solution. There's nothing there where it's a controlled drinking. As they always say, if you're controlling it, you're not enjoying it. If you're enjoying it, you're not controlling it. But there's just no way to control it. There's no part-time recovery here. It's all or none, and you basically are at that point where consequences have become overwhelming and impossible to overcome. And there you are. You either have two alternatives. One is to go to the bitter end, and that is to die an alcoholic. Very serious situation. Or to accept the spiritual help and in doing so, find yourself in a place where you can actually start to survive and do so in an enjoyable manner. So it is definitely really, there are two paths, and one is bad, real bad, and the other one is absolutely great as far as that goes. Rob?
Yeah, and why is it such a difficult choice to make? But you know what? It is a difficult choice. Do we want to change, or do we want to keep on the same path we're going? Nothing seems to be going right in my life. But for me to change, wow, that's going to be difficult. Okay, I put another thing in the chat. We're going to be reading about Roland Hazard just right after we said it. But I want to read this, and this is from Pass It On. When he then asked you if there was any other hope, you told him that there might be, provided he could become the subject of a spiritual or religious experience. In short, a genuine conversion. You pointed out how such an experience, if brought about, might remotivate him when nothing else could. But you did caution, though, that while some such experiences had sometimes brought recovery to alcoholics, they were, nevertheless, comparatively rare. You recommend that he place himself in a religious atmosphere and hope for the best. This, I believe, was the substance of your advice. And that was Bill talking to Dr. Young about Roland Hazard. Now we're going to read about Roland Hazard. Rock and Roland, as I like to call him. A certain American businessman had ability, good sense, and high character. For years, he had floundered from one sanitarium to another. He had consulted the best-known American psychiatrists. Then he had gone to Europe, placing himself in the care of a celebrated physician, the psychiatrist, Dr. Young, who prescribed for him. Though experience had made him skeptical, he finished his treatment with unusual confidence. His physical and mental condition were unusually good. Above all, he believed he had acquired such a profound knowledge of the inner workings of his mind and its hidden springs that relapse was unthinkable. Nevertheless, he was drunk in a short time. More baffling still, he could give himself no satisfactory explanation for his fall.
Yeah, that's really a great example of somebody that goes out. They put a lot of effort into a solution that they think is going to work for them, and we now know that he was basically working under his own self-knowledge and self-power, and it didn't work. But what's important here is that part of this is which is so baffling is that, you know, as alcoholics, we can go out and make decisions in business and in other areas and make those decisions, and they stick, and you just go with it, and everything is fine. There's no resistance, there's no pushback, and there's no struggle. And what gets to be so baffling about this is that you try to apply the same concept, the same psychology to it, and you find that you are unable to with drinking. And in doing so, you find yourself really baffled. And that is part of what they're trying to demonstrate here is that Roland Hazard spent a lot of money, did a lot of traveling, went to a lot of great doctors, including Dr. Young, and he learned a lot about himself. He learned a lot about alcoholism, etc., but not the concept of having that spiritual experience and being able to let go and get that higher power. So it was inevitable that he was going to be drinking again. And it's that baffling feature that really gets us. And it's one that you have to wake up to and grasp onto in order to be able to have the beginnings of a spiritual experience. But under the circumstances, it's still this baffling feature of self-will, self-knowledge, and it not working. Rob?
Yeah, Roland Hauser was a rich guy. He could afford to travel all over the world and see the best people possible. And unfortunately, not all of us can do that. And that still, no matter how much money he had, still didn't solve his problem. He thought he knew what to do now. He thought that, knowing about his mind would solve his problems. He was drunk in a short time. Didn't work. So he returned to the doctor, whom he admired, and asked him point blank why he could not recover. He wished above all things to regain self-control. He seemed quite rational and well balanced with respect to other problems, yet he had no control whatever over alcohol. Why was this?
Yeah, and so we're just a continuation of the discussion here in that regard, and that is that question about why can't I not apply the same principles, the same conviction that I apply to other decisions I make in the rest of my life, and I'm successful at? Why can't I do that with drinking? And again, it's a question that we're going to answer. We won't leave it hanging here. They do ask, why was this? And we're about to find out.
Well, we're not going to answer it. They're going to answer it.
Correct.
He begged the doctor to tell him the whole truth, and he got it. In the doctor's judgment, he was utterly hopeless. He could never regain his position in society, and he would have to place himself under lock and key or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. That was the great physician's opinion. But this man still lives and is a free man. He does not need a bodyguard, nor is he confined. He can go anywhere on this earth where other free men may go without disaster, provided, provided he remains willing to maintain a certain simple attitude.
Yeah, and so we're talking here about the fact that it was a dark truth. It was bad. It was, there's nothing that can be done as far as Dr. Young was concerned, and he would probably have to put himself under lock and key if he or hire a bodyguard if he expected to live long. And so that is bad news to receive, no matter how you look at it. But under circumstances, Roland was able to find the spirit and have the spiritual experience. He was able to tap into his higher power, and in doing so, freed him from the symptoms of alcoholism and his ability to live without it and be recovered. And it's really just got to maintain that attitude. You've got to maintain that awareness, and you've got to maintain that working side of you that gives yourself over to that higher power on a regular basis in order to do so, or in order to maintain your recovery in doing so. Rob?
Yep. Some of our alcoholic readers may think they can do without spiritual help. Let us tell you the rest of the conversation our friend had with his doctor. The doctor said, "You have the mind of a chronic alcoholic. I've never seen one single case ever recover where that state of mind existed to the extent that it does in you." Our friend felt as though the gates of hell had closed on him with a clang. He said to the doctor, "Is there no exception?" "Yes," replied the doctor, "there is. Exceptions to cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. Here and there, once in a while, alcoholics have had what are called vital spiritual experiences. To me, these occurrences are phenomena. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding force of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. I highlighted all that, so keep that in mind. In fact, I've been trying to produce some such emotional rearrangement within you. With many individuals, the methods which I employed are successful, but I have never been successful with an alcoholic of your description.
Yeah, a lot here. First and foremost, he's a hopeless drunk, an alcoholic of the chronic kind, which is the same thing as a real alcoholic or just an alcoholic. It's just a reference, again, a different word that Bill uses for an actual alcoholic. And getting that news, it just seemed helpless and hopeless. There are exceptions, as we find out. There is, as Dr. Young said, exceptions to the cases such as yours have been occurring since early times. And this vital spiritual experience has to happen. And, the doctor then says, this to me is a phenomena which is not easily described and or explained. The ideas, emotions, and attitudes which were once the guiding forces of the lives of men are suddenly cast to one side. This is a major change that you're going to go through, that you have to have in order to fully recover and embrace and do so using this program. It's absolutely vital. And having done so, a new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate. So you have to really embrace that new change and take those changes and apply them not only to your alcoholism, which is first and foremost, but to the rest of your life. The success, again, we talked about this before, is that willingness and openness and honesty that has to happen in order to accept this. Rob?
Yeah, and here's something I'm going to read. This is from Bill W., My First 40 Years, an autobiographical. And this is a quote. Said Dr. Young, that's something I can't tell you. All you can do is place yourself in a religious atmosphere of your own choosing. Admit your personal powerlessness to go on living. If under such conditions you seek with all your might, you may then find. But the experience you need is only occasional. Here and there, now and then, alcoholics have recovered through them. You can only try. It just goes to show how, psychiatrist, Dr. Young, one of the greatest minds. He's one of the greatest psychiatrists in the world. One of the top three, Freud and Adler. And he thinks, how much I can do for you. You can hope to get into a religious sect, and hopefully the change will come over you. Bill from New Jersey always talks about the man falling in the hole, and the psychiatrist comes by and he can't help him. The doctor, well, I can give you an aspirin, if you got a little bump, all these things, all these experts can try to help, but they can't usually get through. Who got through to Dr. Bob? Bill Wilson was able to get through to Dr. Bob. Why? Because he was one alcoholic talking to another. He understood the drinking game. He understood what Dr. Bob was going through. What did Bill supposedly say to Dr. Bob when they first met? I bet you could use a drink. How well we know each other. But, and I also mentioned here that all about the spiritual experience. Ideas, and I've highlighted this over and over in my book, ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of the lives of these men, are suddenly cast to one side, and a completely new set of conceptions and motives begin to dominate them. That is a powerful statement to me. Why? Because it's so true. I have to change the way I am. How do I do it? Well, my old thinking has to get pushed to the side and cast out. If I keep holding on to my old ideas, What is changing in my life? Nothing. So what am I going to do? I'm going to continue to do what I do. And that is to think that my solution is in the bottle. And I will keep drinking. Why? Because nothing has changed in my life. Therefore, I have to cast out these old ideas. A new set of ideas come in. And how can I help people? How can I be of service? What can I do to be, an asset in life? Upon hearing this, our friend was somewhat relieved, for he reflected that after all, he was a good church member. This hope, however, was destroyed by the doctor telling him that while his religious convictions were very good, in his case, they did not spell the necessary vital spiritual experience.
I think that's an important note here, and I don't think it's emphasized enough. We're not talking about going to church and being a part of a program that is a religious program, and all of a sudden because you're a good churchgoer, because you're a devout religious person and everything, doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have this quote spiritual experience. It's that giving yourself up, being open and honest about it, and giving yourself over to this higher power. That's what's important here, and that's different than it is for somebody that is just somebody that is a regular churchgoer. And it's a nice partial step in the right direction. It's an enhancement. It just basically takes and puts a nice wrapper around it, but it is not the basis for what we're trying to accomplish here, and that is that spiritual experience. Just because you go to church doesn't mean you have had this by any stretch. In fact, that doesn't mean it at all. So that's what we're really talking about here, is that just because you're a good churchgoer doesn't mean that you've got it. In fact, we find that a lot of people that are regular churchgoers, that are strong members and participants in a religious program, sometimes are closed-minded at this, because they don't necessarily buy into this whole spiritual experience, because they feel like that they've already been there. It hasn't worked for them, and their current way of looking and thinking about things isn't working, so therefore the spiritual experience isn't going to happen, etc. So we will talk a little bit more about that as we go forward, but the point being is that just because you're a good churchgoer doesn't mean that this is an automatic. You still have to have that spiritual experience, which is different, and we're trying to define that. Rob?
Dr. Bob was going to the Oxford group for a couple of years with his beautiful wife, Anne. But that couldn't spell the difference. It wasn't until Bill sat down with Dr. Bob, told him what he was suffering from. Then Dr. Bob was able to, quit drinking. But as I say, he was going to the Oxford group. He was reading the Bible, but that didn't spell the necessary change that he needed to come up with. So please remember that. Well, we're at the top of page 28, everybody. Here was a terrible dilemma in which our friend found himself when he had the extraordinary experience, which, as we have already told you, made him a free man. We in our turn sought the same escape with all the desperation of drowning men. What seemed at first a flimsy reed has proven to be the loving and powerful hand of God. A new life has been given us, or if you prefer, a design for living that really works.
Yeah, so the dilemma here, a friend found himself. It's the extraordinary experience that you have to have in order to have this change, and that is what happened with Roland, and obviously he had it and became a recovered alcoholic. And it's I think there's another thing that we would kind of, as a sidebar, it says what seemed at first as a flimsy reed. A lot of people don't recognize that as being a reed of grass, not a flimsy reed, meaning something to read it, and as we're doing here. And as it grows, it gets more and it gets stronger and stronger. And the same thing happens with regard to the spiritual experience. And the more you embrace it, the more you give yourself over to it, and the more you practice it, the stronger it becomes. And it does really work. Rob?
Yeah. The distinguished American psychologist William James, in his book, Varieties of Religious Experience, indicates a multitude of ways in which men have discovered God. We have no desire to convince anyone that there is only one way by which faith can be acquired. If what we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of a living creator with whom we may form a relationship on simple and understandable terms as soon as we're willing and honest enough to try. Those having religious affiliations will find here nothing disturbing to their beliefs or ceremonies. There is no friction among us over such matters.
Absolutely. And that's the idea here is that we're not replacing your religion. We're not trying to push away that. What we are doing is saying is that it is an enhancement to what you're already doing, and you will not find it objectionable to go down this path, no matter what race, creed, or color you are, or socioeconomic background, etc. It isn't for just the rich and well-to-do, and it's not just for the downtrodden and the truly destitute. It takes all comers, and it does do um, give you the faith and the strength that you need in order to recover. Rob?
Yep. We think it no concern of ours what religious bodies our members identify them with as individuals. This should be an entirely personal affair, with each one decides for himself in the light of past association or his present choice. Not all of us join religious bodies, but most of us favor such memberships.
Yeah, just real quickly, that is bottom line is we're not replacing, we're not getting in the way of. You don't have to, in any case, become religious and or do so. Although they do say that a lot of people start to be to seek membership in a church, but it is a very personal and private affair, and something that is very inward to the person themselves, and it's not just being a part of a group doesn't do it. You've got to be there personally doing it for yourself. Rob?
In the following chapter, there appears an explanation of alcoholism as we understand it. Then a chapter addressed to the agnostic. Many who once were in this class are now among our members. Surprisingly enough, we find such conviction no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. Further on, clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. These are followed by 42 personal experiences.
Yeah, so we're looking at here is that as it's the explanation of alcoholism as we understand it, then a chapter addressed to the agnostic for those that are the non-believers. I've alluded to it, but it also includes those that are the strong believers. And surprisingly enough, we find our convictions no great obstacle to a spiritual experience. So just reinforcing the fact that you don't have to be religious, but if you are, it's okay. Rob?
Yeah, and I love this. Clear-cut directions are given showing how we recovered. How they recovered, they're going to show us exactly how they did it. Okay, they're not going to beat around the bush, etc. They're going to show us exactly how they recovered. Do we want to do what they did in order to get what they got? That is our decision. Each individual in the personal story describes in his own language and from his own point of view the way he established his relationship with God. These give a fair cross-section of our membership and a clear-cut idea of what has actually happened in their lives.
Right. So we got the personal stories. We got describes in his own language. It's these are enhancements to the first portion of the book. They just reinforce basically individuals and how they went about finding and having their spiritual experience and how they recovered and stay recovered. Rob?
We hope no one will consider these self-revealing accounts in bad taste. Our hope is that many alcoholic men and women desperately in need will see these pages, and we believe that it is only by fully disclosing ourselves and our problems that they will be persuaded to say, yes, I am one of them too. I must have this thing.
Absolutely. We're talking a little bit about step 4 here in this paragraph, or at least it's alluded to, this fully disclosing ourselves and our problems, and that will help put us out there, and we'll learn more about that as we go forward. Um, we're basically just trying to get people to open their eyes, open their minds, and accept this concept, and then embrace it, and in doing so, having their own spiritual experience. Rob?
Yeah, and this is what it's all about is, like you can't keep going on the way you were going. So changes have to happen. Are you willing to make these changes? That's what it all comes down to. Bill gives examples, Roland Hazard. Here the guy goes all the way to Switzerland to try to get help in 1926. That help didn't work. Why? Because nothing changed in his life. I come back to the page 27. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes that were once the guiding forces have to be cast aside. And unless we're willing to do that, we're going to keep on doing the same things over and over again. But, I hope you have highlighted page 27 and that line. To me, it is so, important that we remember that. And we're ready to bring in Mr. Bill?
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Rob. Bill?
Yeah, hi, this is Bill, alcoholic from New Jersey. Thanks a lot, guys. Good job today. This is a good part of the book. There's a lot of good information here. Just the title of this chapter, There is a Solution. That's a promise. There is a solution. That Bill's telling us that there's a way out. There is a solution to alcoholism. And basically the solution is the course of action that's laid out in this book. And that's what he's alluding to through here. He's telling us if we go through this process, that's going to be the solution. And the solution is when we get to step 12 is carrying the message to someone else. That's basically what the whole solution comes down to. And he talks about this guy in here, Roland Hazard. And the reason Roland Hazard is so important, Roland Hazard carried the message to Ebby Thatcher. And Ebby Thatcher carried the message to Bill Wilson. So if there was no Roland, we don't know if Ebby would have ever got sober. And if Ebby never got sober, he wouldn't have carried the message to Bill. And who knows what would have ever happened to Bill. And AA wouldn't be here and none of us would be here. So that's why this guy is important, this guy Roland Hazard. And he basically went over to Switzerland and he saw Dr. Young. And Dr. Young was like one of the top psychiatrists in the world. And Dr. Young couldn't even help him. Dr. Young, tried to use whatever they use, different type of psychological methods, and it didn't work because Roland went back out and got drunk again. And then Roland returned to him. It was years later. The first time he went, I believe it was in 1926. And the second time that he went back and saw him again was either 1931 or 1932, somewhere around that time frame. So he drank for some period of time in between when he saw this doctor. And then when he went back to him, the doctor explained to him basically that some alcoholics have had a vital spiritual experience, and and he explained it as huge emotional displacements and rearrangements, all that stuff that's on that paragraph that Rob pointed out on page 27. And that's basically what this doctor told him that he needed to have. He needed to have that somehow, and he needed to get into some sort of a spiritual organization or whatever so that this could take place. And we talked about the spiritual experience in Appendix 2. And basically all that means, Bill uses a whole bunch of different words to describe change. All of those words that he uses in there, religious experience, God consciousness, transformations, huge emotional changes, spiritual experience, spiritual awakening, personality change. The whole thing means change. And how do we change? We change by going through this process that's outlined in this book. We get a higher power or God in our life, and God is what changes us. We don't change ourselves. By going through this process and we rely on our higher power, that's what changes us. The relationship that we have with our higher power or with God. And that's what we're supposed to do. And that's basically what he's talking about in here. And he mentions this guy, William James, and he wrote the book, The Variety of Religious Experiences. William James was a professor at Harvard University, and he met Dr. Jung at Clark University somewhere around 1909. Freud was there with him. Jung and Freud went there. I think Freud was giving some kind of a lecture, and Jung was like his protege, and he met William James there, and they got along real good, and they liked each other because William James was open to what they call parapsychology, which is basically spiritual stuff, and Jung was very interested in that kind of stuff too. So thank God these two guys were interested in that, and they could pass this on to Roland. Because if Roland would have ever went and saw, Sigmund Freud was an atheist, and he didn't believe in any of that kind of stuff. He believed that everything that you had to learn or experience had to be scientific, medical stuff, and it was all just stuff that was in your mind. And these other guys, they believed in the spiritual stuff, and this guy, Dr. Jung, kind of transferred that to Roland Hazard, that he needed to have some kind of a spiritual awakening or spiritual experience, and then he would be able to stay sober. And thank God he told that to Roland, and Roland carried that to Ebby, and Ebby carried that message to Bill Wilson. So again, if it wasn't for Roland Hazard, we probably wouldn't be here, because who knows what would have happened to Bill Wilson if Ebby never came and carried the message to him. That's why he's important, and that's why they put him in this book. And basically what this is telling us here is that we need to go through this process in order to get that. You don't just have a spiritual experience by, just walking into your first meeting. If that happened to you, God bless you. That was not my experience. When I went to my first meeting, I didn't get a halo over my head and grow wings on my back and float out the window, playing a harp. That just didn't happen. It took some time. And it talks about this here, the educational variety. That means it takes time for it to happen. It doesn't just happen overnight. Some people, in Bill Wilson, he had what's referred to as a spiritual experience. He had it 1, 2, 3, a big flash of light, a big bang, or whatever you want to call it. Most people don't have that. Most people, it happens slowly over the course of time. And that's how it happened for me, slowly over the course of time. I mean, I came to AA and I kept coming and kept coming and kept coming, and I didn't even realize I was changing. And the people around me told me that I was starting to change. I was starting to get better. I was sounding better. I was looking better. I was acting better. But this is a slow process. Just like turning into an alcoholic, for me, was a slow process. I didn't become an alcoholic from the first drink that I drank. It took me a little bit of time, maybe 10 minutes or 15 minutes, whatever, before I started drinking alcoholically. But it took some time for that to happen, and it's going to take some time for you to get better, for it to reverse. So basically what Bill's doing here, he's just giving us some hope. He's telling us there is a solution, and if you follow along with what's outlined in this book, you will get to the solution. All right, thanks for letting me share. That's all I got.
Thanks very much, Bill.
Okay, let's do the serenity prayer, sir.
You got it, sir. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference.